So a year and a half ago, I got a lead on a rare 1939 Harley in northern Indiana, and I decided to chase it down. As it turns out, it became one of the best decisions I made in a long time. Now, many of you guys have been following along with the rebuild of this motorcycle, and it's come quite a long way since you joined us. Now, today is the day that we fire this bike up for the very first time and put life back in it, probably since the first time since the 1970s. Incredibly excited to put this 39 back on the road. This thing came to us in a pile of parts. I chased this thing down in northern Indiana, and the bike was in boxes. We brought it back here after the antique bike meet in Wasion a year and a half ago and pulled the parts out one by one of the boxes and got right to work. So what you see now is really kind of a different approach to rebuilding and restoring old motorcycles. As we call it, it's the restoration. Now, such a special motorcycle, we decided to leave this thing in its current condition, put it back together, make sure it's functionally perfect, but cosmetically the same as we found the bike. So really, really excited. Today is the day that we're going to hear it run again for the very first time. Now, 1939, incredibly special year for Harley-Davidson. It was a transitional year. There were a few years into the Harley-Davidson Model EL, 61 cubic inch overhead valve engine. This is really the heart and soul of Harley-Davidson, really for a long period of time, 1936 on to the late 40s. I think it was 12 years they produced the Knucklehead, 36 to 47. And this, the 39, is one of the most desirable and sought after of all those machines. So the Model EL, 61 cubic inch, overhead valve, Harley-Davidson's first circulating oil system. So revolutionary machine. And by 1939, Harley-Davidson had really perfected a lot of the mechanical issues that plagued the early years and developed this bike into a highly refined machine that would really change the face of motorcycling for years to come and in the future. Is really Harley-Davidson and the American motorcycle industry would never be the same after the introduction and the perfection of the Knucklehead. So 1939, so many special things about the 39 model. So by 39, they'd kind of perfected that rake and trail of the frame and front end. It still has a swept front end, early rake frame. I think these things were only 20, maybe 28 degrees, where just a few years later you get considerably more rake. 18-inch wheels last year. 1939 had the 18-inch wheels, so they'd been running 18 since the VL years, and the first Knuckleheads, 36, same thing. 18-inch wheels, incredibly nimble, incredibly agile, ton of fun to ride. Early style fenders, small brace, narrow. The early tanks, the Knucklehead tanks, incredibly hard to find. These tanks were used for just 4 years, 1936 to 39, and there's the only years that they actually had the petcocks on the OHV models. So in 1940, they went to an in-tank shutoff. So this allows you actually to shut one tank off, keep one tank on, petcocks on both sides. So in perfecting that engine, they'd really developed a lot since the earliest days. They actually decreased the pressure of the bypass on the oil pump, which really provided for better oiling. They got fully enclosed rockers. Downstairs here in the lower end, they actually created a one-piece pinion shaft, and that oil pump drive gear and the pinion gear are splined. So what that does is allow better alignment between the gears. Early on, they had this two-piece pinion shaft, kind of proved troublesome. Gear wear was considerably more. By 39, they've perfected all that. Now, over on the other side, the infamous Harley-Davidson small port heads. I mean, today, small port Harley-Davidson Knuckleheads are near impossible to find. 1939 was kind of the pinnacle and the perfection of that particular head. They actually went on to the big port head in 1940. So last year for the baby butt manifold right here, the small port heads easily identifiable by the boss right here, which replaced the old plug and primer cup. They just left the boss close on the small port head. So very difficult to find. Last year for Harley-Davidson's 4-fin cylinders, the short rib cases just for a few more years. Now, so much about 1939 was the end of an era. It's the last of that narrow clutch, the last of the rectangular shaped floorboards, but at the same time, it's the beginning of a lot of new things. So the overall styling of this motorcycle, incredibly beautiful and proportional. First year for that cat eye dash, and the cat eye dash they ran through 1946. Entirely new instrument panel. Classic look. One of the most noticeable aspects of the Harley-Davidson Knucklehead was that cat eye dash. Running from back to front here, brand new taillights. So the Beehive taillight, one of the most recognizable pieces of those early Knuckleheads, 39 through 1946. So brand new Beehive taillight. 38, 39 deluxe trim. Now this didn't even come on all the bikes. It's on the back fenders, also on the front fenders. I think it's an 8-piece total. All in all, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 little clips per each piece. Neat thing about this motorcycle is that every nut, bolt, washer, clip, pin was with this bike with the exception of very, very few pieces. So all of this bolted right back together like it came apart just a couple days ago. So yeah, in 39, Harley-Davidson also threw a curveball at everybody. Now the 4-speed transmission introduced with the Knucklehead, constant mesh, revolutionary transmission, allowed smooth transfer of gears, 4 speeds, was one of the things that made this big twin motorcycle far ahead of anything else that anybody else was producing during the day. In 1939, for some reason, they went back to a sliding gear transmission. So one of the weird things about the 39s, if you come over here on the shift gate, neutral's actually in between second and third gear. So every motorcycle ever produced, as far as I know, had neutral in between first and second. For some reason in 39 and in their brochure, they claim that it was for smoother shifting. I don't know about any of that. But first gear, second gear, neutral in the middle, third and fourth. Now, I like to ride fast. For me, second to third gears, that power shift, it's when you want to be mashing and on the acceleration. To pass through a neutral there just seems kind of impractical. So just 1 year only they did that, and then they switched right back to that same constant mesh 4-speed that they had in 1936, 7, and 8. So more about this bike. And now every piece on this bike, minus, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the spotlight bar's a little bit later, but it was with the bike. Geez, what else? The kicker pedal's a wartime kicker pedal, but just about everything on this bike is 1939, and a lot of it 39 only. So beautiful handlebars, straight as an arrow, 1939. Last year for that early break. Now you guys have heard me brag about it a dozen times over. The incredibly cool rhino grain saddlebags, and then just installed on the last show a couple days ago, the rhino grain seat from Jason Sheets. So very cool, recovered seat, and he made the thing look like it'd been sitting with that motorcycle all those years. So yeah, last show you guys saw us, we bolted the heads on, we installed the exhaust. Now you guys remember that 1936 to 39, maybe even in 1940, Harley-Davidson used that classic fishtail exhaust before they went to what they call a rocket muffler. So very cool setup. The air cleaner is rare gets. It was one of the best pieces that I had on the shelf for this bike. So one of the few pieces that wasn't with this motorcycle the whole time. Front fender light, spotlights, the wheel rings, very cool setup. So really pleased with how this bike turned out. Now, we've done 3 or 4 shows on this thing that many of you guys have probably seen on YouTube. It's been a whole year and a half, and today is the day where we fire this thing up, or hopefully fire this thing up for the very first time. All we have to do right now is add gas. So I've got the thing wired front to back, absolutely as factory. And if you look, we've got parking light up front, ought to be a tail light on there for parking light also. Ignition on the 1 click, 2 clicks, spotlights, headlights working, horn, sounds like new. This thing, all we should have to do is pour some gas in this thing, and we're gonna hear it run for the very first time. If you guys got some thoughts on how many kicks this is gonna take to get going, every time it's a mystery. I know when I kick this bike over, it feels really good. I wanna ride this thing today, so I'm hoping it's gonna be an easy starter and not hard to tune. It's got that infamous linker carburetor, Harley-Davidson M5 linker carburetor, and usually they're pretty easy. I've rebuilt this one using almost all original parts. I got a new float, original needle and seat, and hopefully the settings that I adjusted it at get us pretty close. So high speed and low speed needle, pretty easy to adjust as long as things are set up right. So what we have here is a half a tank of gas. We've got power to the switch. Pull the points cover off and make sure that we got spark before we go kicking and kicking. So the points are open right now. Let's see. Oh yeah, we got spark, beautiful. A little fuel to the carburetor. Let's turn this gas on. Oh yes. We got fuel to the carburetor. All right, guys, if you got a guess on how many kicks, leave it in the comments. A little bit of spark retard. Let's choke it 3 times. 1, 2. Give it a extra choke just for good measure. Choke off, and here we go. That's a 1-kick motorcycle, man. Wow. Listen to that exhaust pipe. Oh man, it sounds good.